Yo, what's good? It's Spaz, and today we're taking a look at Sony's brand new 1000X The Collection headphones. Now, Sony announced these and I thought they were simply just going to be a luxury version of the XM6s, but after spending some time with them, it's pretty clear that that's not what Sony's trying to do here. The collection is positioned as a culmination of everything Sony has learned from over a decade of the 1000X series, and it's designed to deliver a more premium listening experience with refined sound and more luxurious design than what we've ever seen Sony make in the past. So let's talk about what's new, what's improved, and whether they're worth considering. Now let's talk about the design and build quality. Now, the first thing you'll notice is the design. Sony calls it the Resonate design, and it definitely feels like a step up from the XM5 and the XM6. The materials are far more premium, and the metal accents are hand polished, and the overall aesthetic is cleaner and more mature. The ear cups are actually slimmer than the XM6, and Sony redesigned the headband to be thicker and softer, making these incredibly comfortable for long listening sessions. Now, one thing to note though, unlike the XM6, these do not fold, and for me that is a big deal because if I'm traveling, I'd like to fold my headphones, especially if they're worth $650. Now, some people are gonna love the cleaner design, while others may miss the portability of Sony's newer foldable hinge system. Still, from a comfort standpoint, these still have that premium feel, and they're probably the nicest Sony headphones I've ever worn recently. This is where Sony is making the biggest claim. The 1000X The Collection features a completely new 30mm driver built with a unidirectional carbon composite dome, which is just a fancy way of saying Sony redesigned the driver to improve clarity, separation, and bass response. And honestly, you can actually hear all that. The sound is more spacious than the XM5 and the XM6. The vocals sound much cleaner, and the individual instruments are easier to pick apart. The bass still hits, but it feels tighter and more controlled. Now, rather than boosting everything for excitement, Sony seems to be aiming for a more refined and balanced presentation for anyone who listens to a lot of lossless audio, like Tidal, Apple Music, or high-resolution tracks. You probably appreciate those improvements there. Now, I've actually tested these with everything from hip hop and R&B. I've been bumping a lot of Iceman and V's a lot lately, and the sound is fire. Now, the songs with a lot of stuff going on has plenty of separation. The vocals felt more distinct, and the beats had more room to breathe compared to the XM6. Now let's talk about the new audio features. Now, Sony also introduced the new V3 integrated processor, which powers several of the headphones' biggest upgrades. One of those upgrades is the DSEE Ultimate, Sony's AI-powered audio enhancement technology that attempts to restore detail in compressed music streams. So whether you're listening to Spotify or YouTube or older MP3 files, the goal is to make lower quality audio sound closer to high-resolution sources. Sony is also expanding its spatial audio experience with multiple new 360 reality audio upmix modes, including dedicated settings for music, cinema, gaming, and background listening. Now, if you do consume a lot of movies or gaming content, these modes can create a noticeably wider and more immersive soundstage, which is pretty cool. Now, let's talk about ANC. That's, of course, one of the reasons people even buy Sony headphones in the first place. The noise cancellation here is pretty good. That said, Sony appears to be prioritizing comfort and acoustic performance over maximum passive isolation. Now, because the ear cups are slimmer and designed a bit differently, the passive isolation isn't quite as aggressive as what you would get from the XM6, but in real-world use, you're still getting that flagship level noise cancellation. But if your only goal is blocking out as much sound as possible, like on an airplane or a commute, then the XM6 might still have a better edge. Now, like Sony's recent flagship headphones, you still get all the features that people would expect, like the multi-point Bluetooth connectivity, adaptive noise cancellation, transparency mode, touch controls, app-based EQ customization, high-resolution audio support, and a voice assistant integration. Now, the collection will feel familiar if you've used the previous 1000X products in the past, but that's not really a bad thing considering Sony has one of the most mature headphone software ecosystems available right now. you're coming straight from the XM6s, here are some of the biggest upgrades you're getting with things like a completely redesigned premium build with new materials, a new carbon composite audio driver, V3 integrated processor, an improved audio detail with separation and bass control, a new 360 reality audio with upmix modes, a more comfortable headband and new ear cup design, and a smaller carrying case and more. Now, this isn't really an ANC focused upgrade, it's more of like a sound quality focused upgrade, so think of it less like an XM7 and more as Sony's new luxury audiophile version of the 1000X platform. The battery life is still strong, but it's actually a little lower than the XM6 according to Sony. Sony rates the Collection for around 24 hours compared to the roughly 30 hours you would get from the XM6. Now for most people that's still more than enough, but it's worth mentioning since the battery life has traditionally been a huge selling point for Sony headphones. The way I see it, the Collection isn't really for someone who's shopping for their first premium headphones, but if you just want great ANC, great sound, and portability, the XM6 already does that really well. Now the Collection feels more geared towards someone who's willing to spend the extra for a more luxurious experience, a better comfort, and more refined signature. But after using the Collection, I think Sony accomplished exactly what it was set out to do. Now these aren't designed to replace the XM6s. One thing to note though, something that stood out to me was the weight. Now the Collection is noticeably heavier than the XM6, coming in at around 320 grams compared to the 254 grams in the XM6. That's roughly 25% heavier, but honestly, once I had them on for a little while, I didn't even notice for real. Sony also added a lot more padding and a wider headband, and it does a great job at distributing the weight, so they're still very comfortable to wear for long periods. With that said, if you're constantly traveling and just prefer something lighter, the XM6 is probably still the better option for you. I'd honestly go with the XM6s for the portability and the slightly better battery life, but if you wanted something nicer and more comfortable, then the Collection is for you. For me, I came from wearing the Beat Solos, and anytime I wore them for more than 30 minutes, I felt a lot of pressure around my ears and it was just super uncomfortable, so these are definitely an upgrade. I wore these for about 3 to 4 hours straight while I was editing, and honestly, I never felt the need to take them off. That's probably the biggest compliment I can ever give a pair of headphones. But yo, let me know in the comments down below, I mean, would you guys pick up the new 1000X The Collections from Sony, or would you stick with the XM6s? For me, yeah, I'm definitely sticking with these. These are tough. These are tough, I'm not gonna lie. But if y'all stayed this far, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next time. Peace.